Hey disciples, welcome to Bible study. I know you guys missed me in a couple hours I was gone. You weren't there. Not like you missed her anyway. Just kidding.
You want to show them your week?
So,
We're working on it.
we're still in the story for kids, which is true to the NIV translation of the Bible, and it is in chapter book form, and it's more at like a 7th, 8th grade reading level. And what it is a high level overview of the Bible. They do make the story for adults a lot thicker, something that you can definitely get into if you feel like you're ready for that. But this is a lot more friendly to somebody who isn't well versed in the Bible, who didn't grow up in the church, or just isn't familiar with all the stories and terms. So no matter what your walk of life is, knowledgeable or not, there's a lot to be gained from this book, and from going over a high level, even at my degree of reading the Bible, I still find myself reading this. I'm like, is that what happened? And then I'll read the context in the Bible, and it's almost like a commentary. I'm like, okay, that I can see that context.
Yeah,
so that
because
did happen.
the verbiage is differently. It's worded more.
Yeah, well, it does use a lot of actual NIV verbiage as well, but it definitely does help to dull down some of the high-level stuff to brief understanding. That's helpful even to well-knowledge readers. So no matter what your walk is, enjoy these Bible studies with us. We're on chapter 15. I believe there's about 30 chapters total, so we're about halfway through. Again, it's a story for kids. So where we're at right now is Elijah. Our previous chapter, we talked about David's son from Bathsheba, Solomon, and how his kingdom was torn, and his children and children's children, for the most part, didn't obey God. And that's because Solomon took on too many wives, very lustful. He didn't care whether or not they worshiped God. In fact, he let their pagan practices and false gods impact his life and overflow into his practices. And so he himself was sacrilegious in a way.
Boo!
Solomon, you king who had all wisdom, rich, tons of wives. I'm kidding. It's more of a curse than a blessing. But nevertheless, I think God even promotes in here. I kind of see the underline here of being, even the guy who has it all is still vastly lacking when it comes to God. Even with all of what he had, he still fell into temptation. He still fell prey to sin, and he still was never able to fill that void in his life with anything except for God. So it's a lesson for everybody out there in that regards. What else have we covered? Brief overview. We had Adam and Eve. They were created, first humans, man and woman, husband and wife.
Yeah, good.
Sorry.
You figured it out.
I know. And they fell prey to sin with the help of the serpent, also perceived as the devil. And because of their fallen state, they had Cain and Abel. The first murder happened. From there, we had we had Moses. Start there. And get way ahead of myself. We had Noah, is what I'm looking for. Sorry, guys. And Noah was a uncorrupted man in a corrupted world, whereas God has seen the world become so fallen since Adam and Eve, he decided to destroy all of life, all of humanity, except for Noah and his family, and one of each gender of every kind of animal. And so we survived through Noah, and through Noah came a descendant named Abraham, who showed his faithfulness to God, even to the point of sacrificing his own son. God stopped him at the last minute. Abraham proved his love and obedience to God. And through Abraham came the generation that would eventually lead us to Jesus Christ. So through Abraham, we had great followers like Joseph, who was able to interpret dreams. We had the judges. We had Samson, who was like a leader in the time of Israel before kings. And then we had David, who was the greatest king and who had his own conflicts with lust, but still did right by God, was a man after God's own heart, and God still blessed him and forgave him after his transgressions. And then we're up to Solomon. high-level overview. I know I'm probably missing a lot of big points there, but just a quick catch-up. And now we're going to talk about Elijah, known as God's messenger and one of, if not the greatest prophet of God. I'm going to grab water. Go ahead and start reading and listening.
Elijah lived in Israel. He was as good and God-loving as King Ahab was evil and God-hating. Elijah was one of God's prophets, and God chose him to speak to Ahab. Elijah said to Ahab, "I serve the Lord. He is the God of Israel. You can be sure that he lives, and you can be just as sure that there won't be any dew or rain on the whole land. There won't be any during the next few years. It won't come until I say so." Then a message from the Lord came to Elijah. It said,
"Leave this place. Go east and hide in the Kerith Valley. It is east of the Jordan River. You will drink water from the brook. I have ordered some ravens to feed you there." Crazy, but we know God controls all things, and that includes the birds of the air, the food from the ground. So Elijah did what the Lord had told him to do. He went to Kerith Valley. It was east of the Jordan River. He stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning.
You're only supposed to read the God part. With your God
They
voice.
also brought him bread and meat in the evening. He drank water from the brook.
It was now 3 years since it had rained. A message came to Elijah from the Lord. He said,
"Go, speak to Ahab, then I will send rain on the land."
So Elijah went to speak to Ahab. There wasn't enough food in Samaria. The people there were very hungry. When Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you? You were always stirring up trouble in Israel." "I haven't made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have turned away from the Lord's commands. You have followed the gods that are named after Baal." Baal? Baal. "Now, send for people from all over Israel. Tell them to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of the god Baal. Also, bring the 400 prophets of the goddess Asherah. All of them eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent that message all through Israel. He gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. Elijah went there and stood in front of the people. He said, "How long will it take you to make up your minds? If the Lord is the one and only God, follow him. But if Baal is the one and only God, follow him." The people didn't say anything. Then Elisha said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces. Then let them put it on the wood. But don't let them set fire to it. I'll prepare the other bull. I'll put it on the wood, but I won't set fire to it. Then you pray to your God, and I'll pray to the Lord. The God who answers by sending fire down is the one and only God." Then all the people said, "What are you saying is good? What you are saying is good." The prophets of Baal prayed all day, but nothing happened. Then Elijah prayed to God, and God sent fire down from heaven that burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil.
So talk about being a stand-up person for God. Here's Elijah, and the people are falling away from God. And he's basically like a lone man standing. He's the only prophet of God, the only true prophet of God, and the people already are worshiping different gods. Yeah, they still know the God of Israel, but he's just one of their gods now. So they're real torn, and so he basically is just standing there bold and courageous like, "It's just me. I'm the only one devoted to God. I'm the last of his prophets, and I will stand here against hundreds and prove that my God is the only living God." So it's just a really cool stand-up moment, and it even takes me back to David when he was against Goliath, and hundreds of strong men who thought of themselves as so courageous were weak and fearful when it came to Goliath and wouldn't stand up to him and cowered away and let him mock God. In the same way, the rulers of Israel mock God and have false idols, and no one stands against them, but instead they're cowered behind these false gods and refuse to stand up for the true and living God except for Elijah. So we definitely see some echoes of the past there. I'll make a page for you. Out. All the people saw it. Then they fell down flat on their faces toward the ground. They cried out, "The Lord is the one and only God. The Lord is the one and only God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Grab hold of the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one of them get away." So they grabbed them. Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley, where he had them put to death. Kid's Bible doesn't care at all. I thought I was going to skip that totally. Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done. He told her how Elijah had killed all the prophets with his sword. So Jezebel sent a message to Elijah. She said, "You can be sure that I will kill you, just as I killed the other prophets. I'll do it by this time tomorrow. If I don't, may the gods punish me greatly." Elijah was afraid, so he ran for his life. He came to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servant there. Then he traveled for one day into the desert. He came to a small tree. He sat down under it. He prayed that he would die. "Lord, I've had enough," he said. "Take my life. I'm no better than my people of long ago." Then he lay down under the tree and he fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him. The angel said, "Get up and eat." Elijah looked around. Near his head he saw a flat cake of bread. It had been baked over hot coals. A jar of water was also there. So Elijah ate and drank. Then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came to him a second time. He touched him and said, "Get up and eat. Your journey will be long and hard." So he got up, he ate and drank, and the food gave him new strength. So when I spent time in the wilderness, one of the things we would do is we had wheat flour, and we just mixed it with a little bit of water. And we also had a small bag we carried with us of cornstarch. So we put a tiny bit of cornstarch in it, just a little bit, wheat flour and water, and we knead it. And what we would do is, when the fire was dying down or on the outside of the fire, we would push all the coals to a pile. And we would lay that bread directly onto the coals. And because the coals were just that perfect temperature, it would just make the outside crisp. And then we flip it and do the same. But because of the temperature, none of the coals would stick to it, but it would still make a nice big flat piece of bread for us, almost like penne bread, in a sense of texture and thickness. So that's what I picture when, pita bread. That's what I picture when they say they lay the bread over the coals, and they talk about it a lot in the Bible, because that was the easiest way for us to be able to cook it without modern utensils. And it's not that bad, but it is very bland and plain, but it's a lot thicker and heavier and hardier than you picture our bread. So as you picture like a loaf of bread, this is more like, like a half pound, heavy, thick, hearty piece of bread that's
sounds real dense in my stomach.
It is really dense, but it's still fluffy and light enough that it's still bread, but it's really not that bad, but it is plain. But it's an easy thing to be able to cook over a fire without utensils, like in the desert. Right side top.
He traveled for 40 days and 40 nights. He kept going until he arrived at Horeb. It was the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. A message came to Elijah from the Lord. He said,
What was that name? "Elijah, what are you doing here?"
He replied, "Lord God, who rules over all, I've been very committed to you. The people of Israel have turned their backs on your covenant. They have torn down your altars. They've put your prophets to death with their swords. I'm the only one left, and they are trying to kill me." The Lord said,
"Go out, stand on the mountains in front of me. I am going to pass by." This echoes to Moses when he asked to see God, and God passed by over the mountain.
As the Lord approached, a very powerful wind tore the mountains apart. It broke up the rocks, but the Lord wasn't in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire came. The Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire, there was only a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his coat over his face. He went out and stood at the entrance to the cave. Then a voice said to him,
"Elijah, what are you doing here?" It's like to be a calm voice.
Is that your God whisper?
Yeah. You know what does it really well is the Prince of Egypt. Just saying.
He replied, Lord God, who rules over all, I've been very committed to you. The people of Israel have turned their backs on your covenant. They have torn down your altars. They've put your prophets to death with their swords. I'm the only one left, and they are trying to kill me. The Lord said to him,
Go back the way you came. Go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also, anoint Jehu as king over Israel. So, I want to stop real quick and just talk about something that's very evident that Elijah struggled with, and that's depression, even to the point of wanting to die. But in his defense, you have to look at how lonely he was. He had his one servant with him, yes, but at the same point in time, he's pretty much hated equally by the foreigners in Israel and the Israelites as well, which is common of God's prophets for everybody to turn against them. Prophets of God usually are there to deliver bad news overall. And so people really don't like the words they have to say, and they don't like being called out for their sin. And it's no different today, People are so upset when you call them out, like, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this. And they're like, well, no one's perfect, or who are you to say anything? You've done this. Everybody really backlashes against you whenever you try to coach them or mentor them or hold them accountable, and you're doing it out of love, but there's just no way to come off to somebody without offending them. And same with the prophet. So he's so alienated, he becomes very depressed, and people are after him, and he just kind of hates his position. When he's like, man, God, why did you have me go do this? This sucks. This is what he's saying, basically. It sucks to be hated on by everybody. It sucks to have people trying to kill me and having to run. It sucks living in the desert. This food that the birds drop, I appreciate you bringing me food, but I don't like eating from a bird's mouth. This is a rough life. And God's trying to say, to him, and he's even trying to convince God. He's like, dude, I'm no better than anybody before me. I'm a sinner just as much as they're sinners. Be done with me, God. And he's almost trying to convince God in a sense of, don't, just let me be. And so his depression definitely takes over and almost hinders, it definitely hinders his walk with God, but it in some way hinders his mission from God and his role as a prophet. So as mighty and probably the best prophet Elijah was, he still had his own struggles with his, you could say mental illness, but a struggle with depression for sure, and a struggle with self-worth and loneliness. I will keep 7,000 people in Israel for myself. They have not bowed down to Baal, and they have not kissed him. So this is God's way of reassuring him that he's not completely alone. There are people there who have yet to bow down to Baal and worship him completely. So God's calling for a rally, and it's a way to encourage Elijah, but at the same time, it doesn't completely cure Elijah. We're done.
After God's message, Elijah went to find Elisha. When Elisha met Elijah, he left his life as a farmer and became Elijah's helper. King Ahab went into war and died, and his son Ahaziah became king. Ahaziah was a wicked king like his father. When he died, his brother Joram became king. Elijah was getting old, and God decided it was time for Elisha to become the main prophet in Israel. So Elijah and Elisha went on a journey to a place where God would do an amazing thing. Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. The Lord was going to use a strong wind to take Elijah up to heaven. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here. The Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha said, "I won't leave you, and that's just as sure as the Lord and you are alive." So they went down to Bethel. 50 men from the company of the prophets followed them. The men stopped and stood not far away from them. They faced the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan River. Elijah rolled his coat up, then he struck the water with it. The water parted to the right and to the left. The two of them went across the river on dry ground. After they had gone across, Elijah spoke to Elisha. He said, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I'm taken away from you?" "Please give me a double share of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have asked me for something I can't give you," Elijah said. "Only the Lord can give it. But suppose you see me when I'm taken away from you. Then you will receive what you have asked for. If you don't see me, you won't receive it." They kept walking along and talking together. Suddenly a chariot and horses appeared. Fire was all around them. The chariot and horses came between the two men. Then Elijah went up to heaven in a strong wind. Elisha saw it. He cried out to Elijah, "My father, you are like a father to me. You are the true chariots and horsemen of Israel." Elisha didn't see Elijah anymore. Then Elisha took hold of his own clothes and tore them apart.
Which was a custom of sadness, like you just lost a loved one, like an anguish. How we would fall to the ground in tears, like they would rip their cloaks. But more so, a couple quick things. It skims over a lot of the story of Elijah, so feel free to take a deeper look in there. But just to give you guys an idea, especially in the New Testament, you're going to see a lot of references to the Old Testament once we get there, reading in your own Bibles. And what I find referenced the most is Moses, Elijah, and they like to reference the book of Isaiah a lot. So, Isaiah the prophet as well, but he has his own book he wrote. So, definitely things to look out for. And I believe, don't quote me on this because I would have to fact check myself, but I believe that Elijah is only one of two people to ever be taken to heaven that way in the Old Testament. One being Enoch, who was a descendant of Noah, but before Abraham. And it says that he walked with God and then got taken to heaven, or he was no more. Like that. And then Elijah is taken up to heaven. So those are the only two men who don't actually die, but are taken to heaven with God.
He picked up the coat that had fallen from Elijah. He went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan River. Then he struck the water with Elijah's coat. "Where is the power of the Lord?" he asked. "Where is the power of the God of Elijah?" When Elisha struck the water, it parted to the right and to the left. He went across the river. The company of the prophets from Jericho were watching. They said, "The spirit of Elijah has been given to Elisha." They went over to him. They bowed down to him with their faces toward the ground. God was with Elisha, and he did many miraculous things. He brought a child back to life and healed a man without even touching him. After Elisha died, his bones brought a man back to life. While Elijah and Elisha were prophets, Israel was a rich nation filled with sinful people. God kept getting angrier and angrier at the people's sin, because the people had forgotten that God, not the idols, had made them wealthy. But the people didn't care about God. God decided that if the people didn't repent, he would send kings from other countries to take away everything in Israel. God hoped the people would remember him. He sent a man named Amos to warn the people about what would happen if they kept worshiping idols. Amos said, "People of Israel, listen to the Lord's message. It is against you. It is against the whole family he brought up out of Egypt. He says, 'Out of all the families on earth, I have chosen only you. So I will punish you, because you have committed so many sins.' Speak to the people in the forts of Ashdod and Egypt. Tell them, 'Gather together on the mountains of Samaria. Look at the great trouble in that city. Its people are committing many crimes. They do not know how to do what is right,' announces the Lord. 'They pile up stolen goods in their forts. So the Lord and King says, enemies will take over your land. They will pull down your places of safety. They will rob your forts. The Lord and King has taken an oath in his own holy name. I made sure your stomachs were empty in every city. You did not have enough bread in any of your towns. In spite of that, you still have not returned to me, announces the Lord. I sent plagues on you, just as I did on Egypt. I killed your young men with swords. I also let the horses you had captured be killed. I filled your noses with the bad smell of your camps. In spite of that, you still have not returned to me, announces the Lord. People of Israel, I will punish you. Because I will do that to you, prepare to meet your God. Israel, look to the Lord and live. Look to what is good, not to what is evil. Then you will live. And the Lord God who rules over all will be with you, just as you say he is. Hate what is evil, love what is good. Do what is fair in the courts. Perhaps the Lord God who rules over all will show you his favor. After all, you are the only ones left in the family line of Joseph. I am the Lord and King. My eyes are watching the sinful kingdom of Israel. I will wipe it off the face of the earth, but I will not totally destroy the people of Jacob, announces the Lord. Even though God warned the people several times through his prophets Amos and Hosea, the people in Israel kept sinning.